I feel very excited and honoured to be standing in front of you guys today in such a full room. I'm so glad that you came out the day before or the day of Rugby Sevens in Hong Kong. But you're not here to see me. You're here to see a couple of legends who are going to be talking about sport, the power of sport, and the power of sport for young people growing up. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Sir Steve Redgrave. Do you have a mic, Steve? He is 5-time Olympic rowing gold medalist. He has 9 World Championships titles. Please take a seat. 3 Commonwealth Games medals. Just basically the finest rower the world has ever seen. So thank you, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
The next person I'm going to introduce is Sean Fitzpatrick, former All Blacks captain. He played 63 consecutive tests for the All Blacks, including the inaugural World Cup in 1987, where you won at home against the French. So congratulations and thank you for joining us today. And last but not least, we have Ned Wills, who is Chief Executive of Laureus Sport for Good. He's been with the organisation for 10 years. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about Laureus before we kick off. It supports more than 300 programs in over 40 territories around the world. It's raised more than 150 million euros for the sport development sector, and it's helped change the lives of over 6 million children around the world. So really amazing to have you guys here. Looking forward to this session. And just a little note before we start. I don't want to freak Ned out, but you're actually talking to some world champions and also a world record holder. So I have a world record in masters swimming, thank you very much, in a relay. But it's okay, we're all really down to earth and lovely people, so don't worry.
You haven't asked me about my world
record. Do you have a world record?
No, I don't.
Okay, so let's jump into it. Steve and Sean, obviously we know your really impressive resumes, but what I'd like to chat to you about this morning is how you got into sport in the first place and what impact it had on your lives. So maybe, Steve, you want to start us off?
I'll start. At school, 13, coming on 14, the secondary school I went to, the head of the English department of loved sports, and his 2 main sports was rugby and rowing, and my sport didn't offer those sports at all. He became captain of Marlow Rowing Club, and he used to go around the intake of the students and look at the size of their hands and feet. If they had big hands and feet, then he would ask them to row. In my year group, there were about 12 of us, he asked, and within 3 weeks we were down to 4. And so that's how we started. I was heavily dyslexic at school, still am now. It doesn't go away, and sort of hated academia, but loved all sports, and always sort of dreamed of being a top athlete, of the FA Cup, of a footballer. I was either going to be a striker or a goalkeeper. I was useless at both, so that was never going to happen. Stumbled across the sport of rowing, and we used to go for a Wednesday afternoon, being let out of school to go down to the river. Was just a lot of fun. And then after 3 months, he said, well, do you want to go and do a race? And we thought, well, that sounds good. That's a weekend away. That'd be great fun. We went to Avon County's Schools Regatta. Weren't really expecting anything, but we went on and won the race. There were 5 races within the day. We raced the same crew because there's a repechage system, so we raced the same crew twice. So we knew that we were going to beat them in the 3rd round because we raced them in the 1st round. And then in the final is that we started off, set out, we took an early lead, and as we were getting closer to the finish, one of the guys in the 4 fell off their seat, and the seat got jammed. And that person was doing 2 strokes to every one. The other crew was closing us down really quickly. That person that fell off their seat was me. So it's humble beginnings to what I ended up doing. But sport has sort of changed my life of every aspect. Gave me confidence, self-esteem, and somebody that sort of really struggled at education of advising governments in the UK on sport, health, and of activity. A charm to life just from being out in a boat.
Yeah, sort of a chance given to you, and it sort of changed your life.
Yeah,
incredibly.
Definitely is that, and what we see in some of our projects and around the world is that they may not be able to get to Olympic standard and the elite standard, but it changes their life at every step right the way through. I'm sure we'll get onto that a little bit later.
We definitely will. And Sean, New Zealand, it's a rugby nation. How did you get into rugby, Sean?
How did I get into rugby? I'm a bit like, well, good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be here. Sport, I was looking at sports matters, and in our life growing up in New Zealand, you were a country with 3 million people in the sort of the 70s when I grew up, and rugby was obviously a sport that everyone played. My father was an All Black, so everyone just assumed I'd be an All Black. Unfortunately, I was a fat little kid. But what it showed me is sport really matters, and especially in our growing up in the 70s, rugby was a real community game. Everyone played rugby, everyone went to the rugby club on Saturday, very similar to what Steve did. But it was about earning respect, being together, looking after each other, all those things that, unfortunately, a lot of that's missing in life today. And being overweight, I never played with my mates. I was always playing with older kids. 4.5 years old, I started playing rugby. Hopped on a set of scales, and unfortunately the gentleman said, because whatever weight you were, that was what you played. He said, Sean, you're over there with the 12-year-olds. I was 4.5 years old. So that wasn't much fun. I went to Sacred Heart, and this is for me what sport did for me. I went to Sacred Heart, still not playing with my mates, playing in the worst rugby teams. I played in a team called the 3Ds. You had to be under 10 stone to play in the 3rd grade. I hopped on the scales as a 12-year-old, and I was 13.5 stone. And the teacher said, oh, sorry, Sean, you're playing open grade rugby against all the big boys. And I lived in Auckland. We have a big Polynesian community, and unfortunately I didn't want to play with that. So I went home and told Mum. She burst into tears and rang the principal of Sacred Heart College, Brother Roger, and said, Mrs. Fitzpatrick, Brother Roger, my son Sean has just come home and told me he's playing open grade rugby. Now he is only 12 years old, he could get seriously injured. He said, Mrs. Fitzpatrick, he could not only get seriously injured, he could get killed. So I played in the 3Ds, a motley bunch of no-hopers. But our teacher was a gentleman called Guy Davis, a Fijian, who just epitomised everything sport was about. And he said that we didn't even train on a rugby field. We had 13 rugby fields, and we trained on field number 14, which was our football pitch, our baseball diamond, cricket oval, all that. And he said, there's 3 things I want from you. He said, the first thing, everyone on this team is equal. The second thing I want, when you turn up here on a Monday night to field number 14, I want you to turn up with a bit of attitude that you want to be here. And the third thing, which is, believe it or not, the All Blacks mantra, he said, individually, all I want you to be as successful as you can be. Be as successful as you can be. So that didn't, we didn't win any games, but we all tried harder. Passing with the left hand, kicking with the left foot. But it was such a good message. And we earned respect and all those sort of things. And then, fortunately, I started developing a bit more. But he just clicked a switch on in my head about being the best you can be. And I just say to children today, just enjoy sport. You don't have to play rugby. You don't need to row. Just play sport. Sport is the key thing with our children today. They need to play sport. And that's what we do at Laureus. All our programs, our 300-odd programs globally, they all have a sport component for a reason. It gets them in the classroom, on the rugby field, on the river, but it gets them in the classroom. And that is a key with children today. They need to get in the classroom. And sport does that through all our projects, and we'll talk about our projects shortly. But sport is the key ingredient. And I use the word respect, and that's the one thing that is missing globally. We're not respecting each other.
Yeah, and sport definitely builds respect. So Ned, maybe I'll bring you into the conversation here. Sean has said that sport is key to getting kids into the classroom. Can you tell us a little bit more how that is and how Laureus is sort of helping with that?
Yeah, so Laureus started in 2000, and it's, as Sean and Steve have highlighted, it's about using sport as the tool, ultimately, as the mechanism to engage young people and to help them overcome social challenges they're facing in their communities wherever they are. And we work, around the world in developing countries, as you'd expect, but just as importantly, in fully developed countries and cities, urban spaces, etc., where young people are similarly challenged by different issues, but they're similarly challenged. Sports programming, whatever the sport is the basis on which those kids then start to have the opportunity, not only to become healthier and fitter and those sorts of things, and all the impacts that we intrinsically understand has on the mind and the body, but the more they start to develop an understanding of the values of sport in general. And that's the starting point. We are then able to communicate messages. We're then able to help them to, start addressing and overcoming some of those challenges, not only for themselves but for the communities in which they're living. And it's not because it clearly, and again, it's even in the individual sports, everybody knows it's not just about the individual. It's about all the people that you have around you, and that includes in a community context, whether that is parents, teachers, your mates, the whole community coming together and addressing those particular issues. And that's the basis for what Sport for Good is all about.
And have you seen the role of Laureus change over time? So from, the beginning back in the 2000s all the way through to where we are now, has Laureus changed its approach? Has society changed in a way where Laureus has had to adapt?
I think that from what I've seen, and I've been at Laureus now since 2005 when we were first pulling the foundations of our organisation together. And back then it was very much raising money, giving that money into community-based programs to enable them to do the wonderful things that they do with young people in those communities. The organisation has changed dramatically since. We still very much, there's still an absolute key element of our organisation is to provide that financial backing and support to those particular programs. But perhaps more importantly, when we started doing that, it was this whole idea of sport as an intentional tool for development was very much in its infancy. So we had to invest in understanding why that was. Two areas of sort of research investment into, one, what is it actually about sport that we intrinsically understand that's actually so important to young people's development? But also, we were starting to raise quite a lot of money from different donors, with different backgrounds. We needed to prove to them that we were investing that money in the right way and in the most impactful way. So we also had to start understanding mechanisms as to kind of what's good practice, what's not good practice, these sorts of things. So we developed that research capability. And then the final bit now, which is a very large part of our organisation, is now the shared knowledge of that network of 300 programs around the world. Similar issues exist for young people around the world, albeit in different contexts. But if you can take the learning from one place, the favelas of Rio, for instance, and replicate some of that best practice into inner city London or in Los Angeles, then you can accelerate learning and you can accelerate impact and you can overcome some of the mistakes that are made in one place. They're not made in another. So a big part of our organisation now is about convening those different organisations, collecting and collating that expertise and allowing organisations to learn faster as a result of being part of our overall family.
Great. And Sean, did you have a perspective on that as well?
How we've changed? Yeah. Totally. We've from 2000, there was 35 founder members. We went to Monaco for seven days. We spent a lot of money celebrating excellence in sport. There was no sport for good. And I would hate to think the amount of money we spent. We had yachting regattas, we gave away watches, we gave away cars. We had a golf tournament where we flew in the caddies from St Andrews to make it very special, which it was. And on the Sunday after that, we got together, of the 35 of us, probably 10 of us got together at the Hermitage, sat in a room, and we said the great Nelson Mandela was there with us, and he made a speech that everyone saw publicly, but on the Saturday before the awards, Johan Rupert said, "This is in my great honour, your founding patron will be Nelson Mandela." And I'm sitting in this room with all these great people, and he opened the door and in walked Nelson Mandela. And did I think after what happened in '95 that I'd be 5 years later be sitting in a room in the Hermitage in Monaco with Nelson Mandela? No. And he uttered those words that, sport has the power to change. You as icons of your sports, you have a great voice, so you must use your voice to change the world through sport. And on that Sunday we met and we said, God, we've had the most amazing time celebrating excellence in sport, but we need to do something else. And that was the start of the Sport for Good movement. And I sit here so proudly, Steve and I and Ned, to think that we have 300 projects globally that we support, and it has changed. In the early days, the Academy members used to visit a lot of the projects, which we don't do now, just in terms of financially. But obviously in London we have 4 or 5 projects, Ireland we have projects, Rio we have projects, so Kafu lives in Rio, he goes and visits our local projects. I've just been in New Zealand, I went to Billy Graham's Academy of Boxing in Wellington, in a place called Nai, which is a very deprived area, a lot of children at risk. And Billy Graham, wonderful New Zealand boxer, set up this program years ago, and we support him. We've supported him for 5 years. So things like that. And as I said, I feel very proud of what we've achieved through using sport as a mechanism. And Steve and I, we're so lucky. Brian O'Driscoll's a member of ours also. And we are here, although we're all legends in our own minds, aren't we? And but mostly, the most important thing, what Ned runs, is so important to us, because we are making a difference. 6.5 million children over 23 years. Who would have thought that we would help change their lives? And when you visit these projects, my God. I just dug up a photo, Ned and I were having breakfast this morning, and what's going on in the West Bank or in Israel at the moment is just horrific. We have a project there called Peace Plaza on the West Bank, and I dug up the photo. Unfortunately, I don't know if we can get the photo up, of these 2 beautiful girls. It's a basketball project, and one's an Israeli, one's a Palestinian. They didn't like each other, but sport brought them together. And it's the most beautiful photo, and you think what's going on there today. In West Belfast, we have a program there, bring the Catholics and the Protestants together through sport, realising after all these years, Mum and Dad telling me I hate the Catholics, I hate the Protestants, sport brings them together to help change. So there was so many examples of our projects that they're doing such a great job, and we're helping change the world, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have a great project here in Operation Breakthrough.
Tell us about that project. That's really interesting.
Robbie, I don't know if Robbie's still here. In 2005, Robbie was a policeman in those days, and they had a lot of juveniles that were getting into trouble, and they'd go before the judge, and Robbie set up this between the Hong Kong Rugby Club and Hong Kong Police. They go for the judge, and he'd say, right, you're going to the juvenile detention centre, or you can go down to the rugby club 3 nights a week, and if you don't show up, you'll go to the juvenile detention centre. That was 2005. It's still running. I think the policemen have come out of it, teachers. It's just been phenomenal, just purely through rugby or through sport.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I think that comes back to what you were talking about before with respect. Everyone comes together, they understand each other and their backgrounds more through sport, and they build respect that way, and then they build a future that they might not have previously had. So that's excellent. So we've been looking, at what you have achieved over the time. Ned, maybe we can talk a little bit about what you're looking forward to in the future and what Laureus is going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the future's bright. Perhaps, unfortunately, Laureus is perhaps more relevant. What we do is perhaps more relevant today than it's ever been at any point in our history. the world's a challenged place at the moment, and we've got a lot of work to do. But I think clearly it's fantastic to be able to talk about the stories and the little examples of impact that we're able to have. But I think behind that there is, I mentioned earlier, the infancy. When Laureus first started, we sort of had a broad understanding that sport has this incredible impact. These days, I'm very pleased. There's a whole field of development that is using sport, in this particular way. It's considerably more sophisticated. Our work is very much tied to 6 social focus areas that themselves are then tied into the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a lot of technical international development work that is going on using sport as the platform. So we need to continue to professionalize the approach and focus on the impact that we're able to actually maximizing the impact we're able to have on communities of young people. Broadening out from that, I think, or in concert with that, there is an increasing understanding, and we all have an increasing understanding of our responsibilities as brands, as individuals, as consumers, to not just the environment side, but also those communities where our businesses are operating, where we're getting our employees from, where we're getting our stakeholders, our future customers, and that is a really exciting opportunity, I think, as we move away from an albeit very important element of charity, philanthropy, this sort of thing, but more into this zone of helping brands, helping businesses, helping funders, not only to partner up with other sort of major institutions, governments, non-government organisations, etc., who we currently work with and bring together in these partnerships to create impact, but also from a brand perspective to be able to start to help manage reputational risk. Increasingly, regulators, shareholders are paying attention to environment, social governance approaches of the brands from which they consume, and we are playing an increasing role in driving understanding and delivering to the brands that we work with more around their actual risk management. We're moving away from me as running a charity having to go to CSR departments and say, here's a picture of a smiling child, please can I have some money, to actually a more sophisticated conversation about how do we manage the reputational risks, the regulatory risks that our brands are facing more and more in this modern world. How are we going to actually work with organisations like Laureus, other development organisations, to have a real demonstrable impact on the communities where we're running our businesses? And I think that's a really exciting development for the whole sector.
Yeah, and I think that comes into this idea of brand DNA, right? So I think purpose in marketing as a marketer is something that is, the fad nowadays, I guess I would say. But, how a lot of brands want to get into that world of having particular values and particular purpose that drives them. How can they do that in a more sort of authentic way, or authentically, with Laureus and with other partners like Laureus? I'll throw it out to maybe Sean. Do you want to take this one?
How they can get involved with Laureus or other...
Or show their brand values through the actions that they take.
I don't know if anyone's heard of the Sport for Good Index. Anyone heard of that? Oh my God. That's not good. Well, I won't ask Steve to talk about the Sport for Good Index. So the Sport for Good Index is where companies join. They join the index and they have to show, in terms of how they're using sport within their business for good, basically. And we have an awards. How many sport?
28 on the index at the moment.
Okay, there's 28 on the index at the moment. Companies that are using sport as a mechanism for change. And I could talk about one, say Altrad, who was on the front of the All Black jersey. they use it in a way, their sponsorship with New Zealand Rugby. They have conferences about, obviously the industry is a construction industry and it's a very male-dominated industry, so obviously inclusion, diversity is huge for them, and we do that through New Zealand Rugby, holding workshops with our male colleagues and our lady colleagues to show that sport is very inclusive, and through the All Blacks that works really well. What else, Ned?
I think it's about the index itself is about highlighting, celebrating those brands that are using sport in this way, and embedding. You ask about how brands can use what we're doing with and organisations like ours. It's about embedding those same values that we're trying to embed in young people and their communities and inspire them to overcome the challenges they face. But we see a number of different organisations that are seeking to, again, really embed those values into their own organisations on the understanding that they are better businesses as a result. And I think that the index is one example of us being able to highlight and celebrate those different organisations who are leaning into this particular challenge, using sport to create impact for those communities of employees, shareholders, customers, and future sort of brand stakeholders, if you like.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, so Steve, I might come back to you. Looking at where Laureus has been and where Laureus is going, is there something that you're particularly proud of, having worked with them for a long time?
As Sean talked about before, we used to go to a lot of visits around the world, and obviously we don't want to spend the money out and the environmental impact of doing that, and so we tend to see more projects in our local area. The last 4 years I've been working out in China, so I haven't been quite in tune with the charity that I was before. But I remember going out to Sri Lanka and seeing some projects out there that we were involved in after the tsunami. And it was amazing of going to one of the schools and seeing where the level of the water got to. And Sri Lanka is a very small country and a very, very flat country. The devastation there was there. And I was able to, one of the projects is obviously their passion within sport is cricket. I played a little bit of cricket at school, but wasn't very good, and the size of I playing with these little Sri Lankan boys and girls was very impressive, and seeing their skills and their passion for that. So that was one that I really liked to. I've seen a lot of projects within London and around the UK. But there was one project I went to. It wasn't actually a Laureus project, but another charity that I was working with, where I went to Zambia. It's the second poorest country in the world, or it was at that point. Country ravaged by AIDS. Is that one of the compounds I went to is that there would be one grandparent looking after 6 kids in blocks with block walls, tin roof, and it's just you stood on a slight hill, and all you could see were these of little shacks around, and they was trying to be educated, trying to take them to school. The ones that didn't have any parents or grandparents looking after were in sort of a separate compound where they would be living and of being educated. But again, they use sport a huge amount. And of course, we were taking lots of sports equipment, and the boys were out playing football with loads of rubbish bags sellotaped together and kicking that round. Of course, we had balls and shirts, and we just threw this ball out into the field, and the boys just went absolutely mad. Their goalposts were bricks that they were doing, and they were quite structured when they had their plastic bag ball. When they had the real thing, is that it just went chaos and the excitement and everything. And the girls that we obviously see a lot around the world, is that they're always on the side. They don't really want to engage, or don't have the opportunity to engage. The girls were slightly bigger than the boys, and they got hold of the ball, and naturally they started throwing it around of like netball. keeping away from. Just lost my mic. Keeping them away from the boys, and just the excitement of seeing that in a country where, when we're driving out to the camp, that the only real work that the people were doing were breaking up rocks into little piles, and a lorry would come along and collect all their rocks that they'd broken into little chunks that would be made then into concrete blocks. And they would get paid very little for doing that. And so seeing the projects from that and then seeing the excitement that brings them through, I think one of the things that I would like to see more engaged, which we do a little bit with our brands and our partners, is actually bringing of not just, obviously we need the cash, we need the money to be able to support the projects that we do, but a closer engagement from the actual staff of the business as well. So you get the buy-in right the way through with the DNA, that it's not just a company that are endorsing what we're doing, which is what we need, but actually complete buy-in throughout the whole of the organisation, and even the staff getting involved in the projects and having that buy-in from it. I think that's so important for the well-being of everybody, even though they might not be doing sport themselves, but they're engaging with what we're doing as part of the whole improvement of society.
Can I just give you a quick example of equality in girls and boys? We have a project winner every year at our awards. One of the projects comes to the awards from around the world. And in 2015, we had a project from northern India called UWA. And this young couple were touring around northern India, a young American couple, came across a village and got engaged in the village. In the village, there was 90% of the girls were illiterate, and almost 100% of the girls in the village were going to be child brides, which is 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. They couldn't believe it. So they set up a school to start educating the girls, and then they also set up a football team where the girls played football, which was unheard of. The boys are the ones that get educated, they're the ones that go out, and the girls are illiterate, going to be child brides. That changed in the space of about 3 years. We're now, it's almost zero child brides, and most of the girls can read and write. And they came to the awards in 2015, and the one thing that stuck with us was when I asked them the question, what's the biggest learning, or what's the biggest thing you've got out of this? And they said, you know what, Sean? Us as girls, we can now dream, which is just, for us, we all dream. But they would never dream. Why would they dream? Because they're going to be a child bride and they're illiterate. That was their job. That was their role in life. And through this young couple who came to the awards also has helped change their lives forever. It's just phenomenal, and that's through sport.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's the type of thing that would take generations to change usually, and to be able to do that even in a small, just in one village, and then build it out through there over the course of a few years is really amazing and really meaningful. So yeah, that's a great story. Ned, do you have any particular projects that you're particularly proud of in your time with Laureus?
Yeah, all of them. You can't go to one of these programs and not be inspired by the resilience that you see there of the young people and the tenacity of often founders, and the commitment of people who could be working in other areas of probably making more money and carving a better life for themselves, but who give themselves to those communities. So that's
maybe. Because a lot of these, we don't have any of our own projects. So of the 300 projects, we invest financially. But maybe, Ned, you could talk about the other side of it in terms of running their businesses, helping them to run their businesses. Because a lot of these are husband and wives, or the two kids from America trying to run a charity.
Yeah, I mean, again, our approach has evolved and developed over the 20 years that we've been running the programs, and funding, as I said at the beginning, making a grant was only really ever the first stage, and as we've got to know a lot of those programs and the way they work, you start to understand a little bit more of the challenges, whether that's a founder challenge, how do you sustain these particular programs, how do we overcome some of the again, the kind of the challenges of philanthropy, whether that's kind of, donor-led, big donor comes in and says, I'll give you, this much money, but you're going to do this, 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 and this, which is not particularly community-centric, and what you end up with is, donors deciding what a community needs and what the money should ultimately be spent on. We've developed our own models as to kind of how we are connecting, convening those different programs, helping them beyond just the money, helping them with knowledge and expertise, helping them with an understanding of how do we make them more efficient, how do we create economies of scale in terms of allowing them to access systems, processes, knowledge that we have ourselves built up over 20 years that then accelerates their development, and again allows them to maximize the impact on the young people, not spend an enormous amount of time filling out forms and doing admin and doing things that we as a donor need them to do, but rather actually focusing on the impact on young people. One of the initiatives here in Hong Kong and actually in 10 different cities around the world is our Sport for Good City approach and model. And the idea of that is there are a huge number of very small community-based organisations that might well be a husband and wife or an individual who's trying to make a difference. And often these small organisations don't really get on the radar of big funders, donors, that sort of thing, because they're so busy trying to deliver to what could be a very small number of kids, but nonetheless they're having a huge impact on the lives of those young people. And the Sport for Good City model is about bringing those organisations ultimately together, those small organisations together, aligning them what they're trying to do, because so often these young people they're working with, they're all trying to do largely the same thing. But if you can bring them together, get them to work a little bit more closely together to understand that, okay, this is the impact that we're having on this young person's life in this aspect of their life. Oh, but actually I'm working with the same kid over here trying to do the same sort of thing. If you can bring those elements together, then you can start to create efficiencies. You can start to align the impact that lots of different organisations are having on the lives of those young people, and perhaps more importantly, put them together from a funding perspective to actually go and seek wider support from funders, create that community, and give them some visibility as to what they're trying to do. And we've replicated this approach around the world and having some enormous successes in accessing then more government funding to actually then distribute and support those much, much smaller organisations that would otherwise, not really even get on the radar of funders.
Yeah, a really great way of delivering impact. Couple of minutes to go, so I've got one more question for each of you. Quick one, what are you looking forward to in the coming days, coming weeks, coming year? Well, what really gets you excited? Ned, we'll start with you and we'll come back around. Lunch.
As I say, I think, we've got a lot of work to do. We're making some huge strides at the moment in some really interesting areas. I think of, as I say, moving away from the traditional, albeit, if we continue to raise donations, then that's phenomenal. But this ability to drive our organisation as a charitable business rather than a charity, servicing organisations, servicing the community in a much more sophisticated way than traditional philanthropy, I think is a really exciting area for us to lead in. And with the support of these wonderful ambassadors, now 350 or so sporting heroes from around the world who are who support the work that we do, I think we have a lot of work to do, but it's an extremely exciting time, I think, for this whole area of purpose-led marketing and reputation management. So for me, in addition to being able to see the programs, the impact on young people, that sort of thing, but I think driving our business forward is a really exciting future for us.
Absolutely.
I think in terms of this, obviously the legacy of our organisation is really important. We're 23 years old. We speak about in the All Blacks about passing the jersey on in a better condition than what you found it in. Steve and I have been here a long time. We'll be passing our jersey on shortly. But it's so important that we continue to do what we're doing because we're making a difference and just living the words of Mandela. And that's not just Laureus. The whole movement of sport for good is just so important to what's going on in the world. Immediately, at 13 minutes past 1, New Zealand is going to beat Great Britain.
You had to bring that up.
Mr. Glover's son, I had a good chat to him the other night. There's a bit of unrest with the Scots and the Welshmen. But no, I'm looking forward to the Sevens. I think this is a fantastic event. It's a real celebration of sport, so looking forward to that.
Fantastic.
I know the clock's just ticked over, but very briefly, it's the closeness of partnerships. I've been involved not quite as long as Sean. I won one of the Laureus Awards in 2001 and got involved a few years after that. But you've heard some of the projects, you've heard of some of the sporting celebrities that are ambassadors. But what makes it all work is the partnerships between business and sport. Sport has changed all our lives, and it's got that opportunity to change other people's lives at whatever level. Some of us have been at the highest level we can within our sport. It's not about that. It's about impacting people's lives, and sport gives that self-esteem, that confidence, that process that they need. So it's the partnerships that we need right the way through.
Yeah, absolutely, and a great way to end it. I think it's about being the best that you can be, and sport allowing you to do that. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time, guys, and
Thank you very much.
on to the next thing.
Thank you.